been one of the most time-consuming things I've ever picked up. It fills every waking hour, basically. Don't tell my wife. But it does. It takes up a lot of energy, and so it has to be fun. It should never become a chore. If it becomes a chore, then stop and do something else. I think that's it. For many years, I was doing most of my hobbies alone, not really joining any of the local communities. I found out that if I wanted to enjoy my hobby and be around people as well, I had to find someone. In most places, those people don't just hang on trees. By chance, I found one of my very best friends to this day, and he introduced me to his group of painters, which is basically all the people I consider my friends today, and colleagues as well, for some of them.
There is a store nearby, a big hobby store that for the first year of my miniature painting journey, I didn't even know existed. And it was a 5-minute walk from this Warhammer store that I would go to. We gather there as like a unofficial community where the regulars come in, all of us get together and we just work on whatever we're working on and chat whatever's on our mind. It's a great sense of community, and again, getting into miniature painting is not just being great for me, my mental health, but also socially, meeting people, like-minded people, and enjoying shared experiences even when we're in our own little worlds working on our own little projects.
For me, it is absolutely the biggest thing of all this painting is the sharing part with my closest friends and the world around us. That is what keeps me going. That's what pushes me, is the validation I get from showing off painted miniatures. And I actually don't know where I would be without either the community. I know I wouldn't be painting, that's for sure. Without the community, I wouldn't be painting.
I started playing D&D last year, and the other guys in my party inspired me to try painting.
I got into painting because a friend of mine did during the pandemic. She's just one of those people, she picks up a hobby and she's like instantly talented at it. I had to work at it a little more. So she gave me some of her, minis that she got from this like odds and ends bin. It's really fun, and I just hope to continue.
It was a lot of fun to learn how to paint and to really hone my hobby. And you may think, well, it's 70 years old, you've seen everything and done everything, but let me tell you, one of the greatest things is always having something new to learn, and I'm just so excited about where my painting's going to go in the future because it is so much fun, and I have so much to learn even at 70. It's just fantastic. It keeps my mind sharp, and thanks for keeping me super young.
Painting for me is more than a hobby. It's a thing I do to meditate. It's a thing I do with my friends. It's a thing I do to make new friends. In a world that is so fast and so online, it's really good for mental health to just like sit around a table, chat and laugh and paint with friends and do it together.
I'm pretty lucky. I found a really cool small group of friends. We were in a board game bar and we all signed up to play a D&D game together. Well, 10 years later, we've now finished 3 D&D campaigns, and it was partway along that journey they really encouraged me on the painting idea, where I bought a few minis and a few goes at slapping paint on, and they were just super supportive of what I produced, and that gave me the confidence to keep on going.
It's all centered around painting models and playing with models, but if you boil it down to the very essentials, you could just strip the miniatures out of it, and it would just be friendships. It's just a shared interest. It could be anything, really. I suspect that we're just compatible because we like the same stuff.
I started my journey painting online last year, and I've met so many wonderful community members a part of this. But of course, my biggest cheerleader and the biggest supporter I think I have, of course, is my wife, who is my support when I feel like a paint job or something else doesn't look as incredible as it should.
your own worst critic, really. You're always the one looking at your own miniatures, thinking they're the worst. Like, that's also been a really cool thing about working at the Army Painter is everybody is very interested and supportive and enthusiastic about what everybody else is painting. And you sort of actually realize that, hey, I'm the only one who's being critical of what I painted. Learning that and understanding that is just a big game changer in like relaxing that like FOMO of wanting to do everything right.
Over the years, I've really grown to love when I get to sit in a room with other people and paint, and they tell me, oh, you should try this, this really works. That is a tremendous help to have someone in the room with you to show you their technique and you can share your technique. I think that's a great way to learn.
I was in my early days of painting miniatures on Twitch. I used to have a dog who was kind of part of the stream. Her name was Evie. She was a little corgi. I took her to the vet and got some pretty unfortunate news about her that she had grown this massive, essentially lump of cancer right next to her lung that was pushing on her lung. And there was basically nothing that they could really do about it. Because of all those veterinary bills, I was going to have to cancel my trip to my first trip to Adepticon. But the community, the miniature painting community kind of rallied, and to my surprise, they raised enough funds that I was able to get everything covered for, which was honestly one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. And I ended up winning a gold medal or a gold trophy in my first painting competition since I was a kid. So is there anything else you'd like to add? Normally probably the best bit of advice that I ever got from another miniature painter was to paint to your temperament. And it kind of took me a while to realize kind of what that meant, but it was really, about painting to your satisfaction, not pushing yourself too hard. If you push yourself too hard all the time, you're going to burn out.
But the most important part is I just still enjoy doing this. And I want to kind of share it to other people that you don't have to be a pro level painter to have fun doing this. I'm not a professional by any stretch of the imagination.
It's more about the journey than it is about the destination. You can always improve, and of course you can always innovate and create and move. That's what mini painting has always meant to me.
These are toys and not something that needs to be perfect.
If you get out there and you paint, that's going to be worth something. Doesn't matter if it looks like something you pulled out of that child's toy bin that has been covered in temper paint for 15 or 20 years. You still painted it. That's worth something. A painted model on the tabletop's worth more than a pile of plastic in the box.
Model painting is just a form of art. There's no one way to look at it. There's no one way to do it. So do it how you want to do it. And if people don't like it, too bad for them.
It's about me having fun and doing something, and not about trying to beat other people or be better than that amazing thing that I've seen out there. There will always be incredible painters and artists. I'm not one of them. I'm just a guy that's bumbling along, having fun, trying to learn a few cool tricks as I go.
The point is having something to sit and do quietly that takes my mind off the real world.
And in the world as it is today, I think having something analog you can do with your hands that you made, I think that's more valuable than ever.
Actually, at the time of recording this video, I'm gonna be dead in about 7 to 10 days. And, it's an exciting time, but thinking about this passion of mine, painting, and what's coming next, I really wish I'll be able to, pass on this passion and maybe, use miniature painting and model making and whatever the whole hobby. Whatever the whole hobby includes, to have quality time with my kid.
I told you that I want to see your miniatures. So beyond, tagging us on a social media post or using hashtag #NoRulesJustPaint, share something in the comments. Send it to us in an email for all I care. I want to see your work. I want to see what you're doing. Come find me at an event and show me what it is that you're going to enter into that competition, or show me your army. If I have time, I promise you I want to see it. And I promise you I'm not the only one in this community that feels the same way. Share your work, have fun, and enjoy.
Have fun, experiment, just enjoy it.
Trust the process. Enjoy the journey. And keep painting.
You got this. Happy painting.
Enjoy your model painting journey, everyone.
We've been in this industry for many years now in Army Painter, about 18 years. And I think the last 4 or 5 years have really clicked for us. We've really engaged with the community. We've done that a lot and always tried to be supportive of events and everything like that. But I think a couple of years back, it really clicked with us, and the community now is helping us develop products. And we're not just developing products for the community or for consumers. It's really become a hybrid, a merger of ideas and fantastic products. And I think we will keep doing that in the future, because the painting community just keeps growing. And I love the fact that techniques are no longer just one-sided and paints are no longer one-sided. There are so many different things to choose from. And it's just I'm in it for life.
Remember to like and subscribe over at the Army Painter YouTube channel, on our Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads. That's about it. Sign up for our newsletter. Stay informed. We got new tutorials coming monthly in some form or another. So let us know what you'd like to see us paint. Don't use that thumbs up.